This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the Facto Leaders podcast on the B Podcast Network, where I share up-to-date, evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help pediatric therapists, educators, and aspiring school leaders design services that support social, emotional, and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood. Whether you want to learn effective strategies for your therapy session or classroom, be an influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 240 of the De Facto Leaders podcast on the B Podcast Network. Today I am doing a quick Q&A for a question that I get all the time from my Language Therapy Advanced Foundations members, as well as people who are interested in the program. So, to give you a little synopsis, Language Therapy Advanced Foundations is my program for SLPs that gives them a system for language therapy that helps to support the language skills that kids need in order to build that high-level comprehension and expression, all of the skills that are going to be really important for them to succeed in school and be successful with reading and writing and spelling, as well as the language skills that are going to support them in other areas of life and well beyond school. So in the program, we get into a framework that helps to build vocabulary using skills like phonology, orthography, morphology, semantics, and syntax. And one of the tools that we use is word study. It's all centered around the concept of really helping kids build metalinguistic awareness around their vocabulary skills, really having that awareness of words. And this can tie in a little bit with pragmatic language as well and perspective taking. So there's a lot of executive functioning built into the framework as well, because you need to have that self-awareness of whether or not your language is clear to the other people that you might be communicating with. And you also have to have awareness of whether or not you're comprehending the messages that you're getting from other people. So a lot of things that we work on in the program, but one of our core strategies is word study. So one of the number one questions that I get is, how do we select the right words for word study? So I'm going to start off with what not to do, and then I will end with some recommendations, and I will also share some resources that you can go to if you want to learn more information from me. So, what not to do? So, the things that you do not want to do if you are doing word study and you are doing language therapy and you want to build your students' vocabulary. What you should not do is write goals for getting through certain numbers of word lists. So you don't want to make your goal to be to get through all of the words in third grade, for example, on the third grade curriculum word list. And when you're measuring progress, you also don't want progress to be measured by, we got through these 10 words, because what that ends up doing is, one, it's impossible to be maintaining that system throughout your entire year. What ends up happening is that you are going to be scrambling, trying to keep up with those word lists, and it's going to be very difficult to keep up with that pace, especially if your idea is, well, I want to stay up to date with the words that are being taught in the classroom in science and social studies. What that does is set everyone up for failure, because what you'll end up doing is just drilling the words and end up being kind of like a tutor, but not a high quality tutor, more of just a homework helper. And as a clinician, you want to build the skills that are going to help kids to perform well on that social studies or science or other subject. You don't want to end up being someone who's just kind of reviewing whatever homework assignments are coming through, or or whatever classroom assignments are coming through that week. So, what you can do instead is build the skills that are going to help students to consistently across the year perform well in those assignments. So, rather than trying to focus on those what we would often refer to as tier 3 words or those content words, you want to focus on the tier 2 words, because the tier 2 words are those words that come up over and over again. They're difficult and they happen consistently across the curriculum and across content areas. So if you focus on those words, often they end up helping kids access the curriculum and learn the other more difficult words more effectively. So things like analyze and summarize and comprehend, and some of the words that you see frequently coming up on assessments, or honestly, not even just in academic situations. There's a lot of robust vocabulary that comes up over and over again in complex texts. And those words are going to be way more useful than trying to keep up with units. So I don't recommend goals for getting through specific word lists, nor do I recommend that you try to stay up to date with every single word that's coming down the line for every unit. So the question often becomes, well, how do I align with the curriculum? Don't I have to do what's in the classroom in order to be aligned with the curriculum? So my answer to that question is no, your therapy does not have to look exactly like the curriculum in order for it to be aligned with the curriculum. What it has to do is build the skills that are going to help students access the curriculum. That might mean that what you do in therapy might look a little different from what's going on in the classroom if the teachers in the classroom are not able to get to the skills that your students need in order to close those gaps. So many times, in order to be aligned with the curriculum, your therapy session actually has to look different than the curriculum because you're, again, filling in those skills that the teachers might not necessarily be able to get to. That's why kids are coming to see you in the first place. So, when we're thinking about word selection, one other thing that I would caution you against is thinking about words as being age appropriate. Many times I often get the question of number one, how do I choose the words? And number two, what words are age appropriate for fourth grade, for example? This is very difficult to define because when we think about what's age appropriate, vocabulary is so specific to exposure and geographic area. So it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly what words are appropriate at what age. So I don't think about word selection within the context of being age appropriate. I think about them within the context of what is going to be useful to students. So, how do you figure out what's useful, and how do you figure out how many words you should be targeting and what words you should pull in with to your word study? So, what I recommend is that you use things like the curriculum, and sometimes you can use word lists. I actually offer some tools and resources that have word lists that are pulled from common curriculums. And what you can do is it's totally okay to have lists of tier 2 words that are examples of tier 2 words that would come up across certain grade levels, or an even better thing to be doing is collaborating with teachers to, yes, get some word lists, get some assessments. Sometimes teachers will have, a lot of times in the reading curriculum, there will be tier 2 vocabulary identified. So it's good to have a robust set of words that you can pull from, but not for the purpose of thinking about what's age appropriate and not for the purpose of feeling like you have to get through all that words, but rather for the purpose of having a lot of ideas about words that you can pull and then using your clinical judgment to figure out, okay, based on this review of the curricular materials, which words are coming up more frequently and what words can I pick and use in my word study to help kids have some examples of specific words that we can use to kind of play around with. So when I teach people to do word study, I have you walk through things like semantics and how to define and describe words, how to study words by looking at morphemes and looking at word parts, as well as how to look at sentence structure and think about words within the context of how they might be used within a sentence. So, what we want to have is a number of words that we can play around with students to help build that awareness. And yes, it makes sense to have specific words that we're targeting and focus on those tier two words. But many times it's about the strategy and the process rather than only the content. So the content is relevant, but it's not just about teaching specific words. It's about building that awareness of word parts and structure and giving kids those skills that are going to help them continue to learn words, because it's going to be impossible for you to teach all of the words that students need to know. Again, we want to build that awareness by teaching those really robust strategies that are related to things like phonology, morphology, and syntax, and those features of words. So we can make kids more aware of those features. So to wrap it up, the recommendations again are to pull those words from the curriculum with a strategic process. Again, I know that feels a little bit messy, but many times, if you have a good process and a decision making protocol, that can actually be more powerful than feeling like you have to get through a certain word list. Also, as far as the number of words, a good place to start is to, again, aim towards those tier two words and aim to target 1 to 3 words per week with your students. That tends to be, if you're working on things like syntax, a lot of times you might be spending those weeks pulling in words that you've reviewed before and focusing more on the sentence structure. So again, that can vary, but as a general rule, I recommend that people pull from their curriculum and aim to pull in about 1 to 3 words per week. So 1 to 3 new words. Of course, you're going to be weaving in those words that you reviewed before, and you might make some cushion in your planning for some review because you know that students might need it. So all of those things. Again, there's flexibility within this process and within this recommendation, but that is a place for you to start. And in Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, I help you to figure out, okay, once we've selected the words, what do we actually do with them? How do we study them? So that is how I usually answer that question, and that gives people a lot of clarity. So before we get going, I wanted to recommend some additional resources to help you with both word selection and strategy, as well as word study. So I actually have 2 programs that are complementary. Sometimes people like to take both of them and take them together. And sometimes people like to take one or the other depending on what they need. Now, they're not sequential. You can take them in any order that you want, but let me share a little bit about how they work. So I have the Vocabulary Foundation, which is a program that will show you the strategy for word selection. If you want to dive deeper into this process of selecting tier 2 vocabulary and understanding the difference between tier 2 words and understanding how students learn words, then I show you how to do that in the Vocabulary Foundation. I also give you some recommendations for assessing your students' word knowledge. And this is more for things like assessing students' progress and depth of knowledge with words. So I also give you that protocol in the Vocabulary Foundation. This is kind of that setup. So that strategy for word selection as well as some assessment. And I also provide some word lists along with this program. The reason I provide you word lists is not because I am saying these are the words that you have to target if your student is in 5th grade. These are the words that are age appropriate at Again, whatever grade it is. I give you examples of words that were pulled from curriculums from kindergarten through eighth grade, again, to give you that robust list of words to pull from and to help you to understand examples of tier two vocabulary. So it's more of a jumping off point rather than something that's rigid. It's always great to have a good set of words to use, but there might be times when you're using one of the words from the kindergarten word list with a third grader if you feel it's appropriate. Or maybe your kindergartners might be ready to work on some of the words from the fourth grade list. So there's some flexibility, but I give you those examples to help you define your process of word selection. So I will share the link to the Vocabulary Foundation in the show notes. You can also see all of my products and services if you go to drkarenspeech.com and you go to the products and services tab. And then finally, if you want to learn that system for language therapy, and you want to learn, what do I do with these words? How do I do word study? What is my system for language therapy? I show you how to do that in Language Therapy Advanced Foundations. So this is the more comprehensive program. The Vocabulary Foundation is kind of a setup. And then the Language Therapy Advanced Foundations is where I get into the actual treatment protocols that address things like phonology, orthography, semantics, syntax, and really build those metacognitive skills around vocabulary. So to learn more about Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, you can go to drkarenspeech.com/language therapy, as well as on my products page of my website. This is my most popular language therapy resource. And I would not say that the Vocabulary Foundation is a prerequisite, but some people like to take the Vocabulary Foundation first to learn about word selection before they dive into the therapy strategies. But some people like to start off with Language Therapy Advanced Foundations, and then sometimes they like to back up and deepen their knowledge in their word selection. So it really depends. Again, some people like to go through the process in a different order, so you definitely have those options for you. I will link to both of those programs in the show notes, but again, you can see all of them on my products page on my website. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time. And if you found this episode useful, please feel free to share it with your colleagues.